It's hard to reconcile the wave of mass shootings that have gripped the world lately. Mass murder is too far outside of what we can understand. For most of us, it's so inconceivable that it seems inhuman, like something no person with a brain and body like our own could ever do. We're so desperate to understand it that we come up with any kind of explanation that we can wrap our minds around. Perhaps it's the media's fault, we think, or bullying, or gun laws, or video games, or TV. But the murderers haven't tried to hide why they did it. Before nearly every massacre, the shooters have told us exactly what they were thinking. They've written manifestos that let us see what's happening inside their broken minds. They've spelled out the twisted logic that brought them to kill. They've given us their answers in their own twisted way, but be warned, these are the thoughts of deranged minds, and the answers are never as simple as we want them to be. I don't like Mondays. That was the only explanation 16-year-old Brenda Spencer gave. In 1979, she set up a rifle in her San Diego home and opened fire on an elementary school across the street, wounding 8 children and an officer and killing 2 adults. When a reporter asked why, though all she said was that she didn't like Mondays and that she was bored, this livens up the day. The lack of remorse in her answer made the phrase a cultural phenomenon, and what little else she said during the attack didn't help anyone understand. When she surrendered to police, she told them that shooting children was like shooting ducks on a pond, and that she liked to watch them squirm after they were hit. But despite the detached face Spencer wore throughout her actions, the things she said before she started shooting seemed to hint that there was more that led her to that moment than just boredom. The gun she'd used had been given to her by her father, and she'd taken it as a hint. I asked for a radio, and he bought me a gun, Spencer said. I felt like he wanted to kill myself. Spencer, who had described fantasies of becoming a sniper to her friends and family, told her friends she was going to use the gift for something else. Before she started shooting, she told her friends she had a different motive. Watch the news, she told them, because she was going to do something big to get on TV. Someone's bound to say, what were they thinking? Eric Harris wrote in his journal days before he and his friend Dylan Klebold walked into Columbine High School and killed 13 people. This is what I'm thinking. I have a goal to destroy as much as possible. Harris saw himself as an enlightened person because he saw the irrelevance of life. People will say things like, oh, it was so tragic, he predicted. You think that's a bad thing? Just because your mommy and daddy told you blood and violence is bad, you think it's a fucking law of nature? He saw his massacre as an act of natural selection. Everyone should be put to a test, he wrote. See who can survive in an environment using only smarts and military skills. Those who didn't question conventional values, he felt, were unfit for anything at all, especially life. His journals, the FBI believes, reveal a Meseniac-grade superiority complex. He saw himself as above humanity, like an angel of death sent to decide who deserved to live and die. Harris deemed few worthy to live. The majority of the audience won't even understand my motives, he wrote. They'll say, he's crazy, he's insane. Oh well, I wonder if the bulls won. While Harris filled his journal with furious condemnations of humanity, Dylan Klebold's journal was full of poems and a deep longing for some type of human connection. The world is the greatest punishment, life, Klebold wrote in his journal. He'd been cutting himself to kill the pain that he blamed on his inability to get a steady girlfriend. To Klebold, love was the only path to a meaningful life. In a short poem he wrote, the true great person achieves happiness only when he has met his soulmate. For all he craved human connection, though, Klebold didn't see himself as human. He mused in his diary about when he got covered up by this entity that had taken over his body. In other entries, he called himself a non-human or a god. He was, he believed, the god of sadness. He and Harris, Klebold said, were conceived from ourselves and each other. The rest of humanity were zombies, sent as a test to see if our love was genuine. Time to die, time to be free, Klebold wrote. Days before the massacre, time to love. I needed to do this, J. Len Freiberg wrote in 2014 in his final text message to his family. Moments later, he would walk into his Marysville, Washington school, kill 4 of his classmates, and commit suicide. He asked his family to apologize to his friends, parents for what he was about to do, saying he needed his crew to come with him. I needed, ride or dies with me on the other side. A breakup set him off. Days before the massacre, Freiberg's girlfriend broke up with him. In retaliation, he started bombarding her with texts promising he'd kill himself and trying to blame her for it. Don't bother coming to my funeral, Freiberg texted her. I set a date. Hopefully you regret not talking to me." In his final message, he told his parents that he loved them, but that he wasn't happy. To him, his massacre was nothing more than a trip to the other side of existence. He just wanted to make sure all of his friends were there with him. He murdered 4 people and injured 1 more purely because, in his words, "I didn't want to go alone." "You caused me to do this," Cho Sung-hee said in his manifesto he sent to MSNBC on the day of the Virginia Tech massacre. He was getting ready for a slaughter that would kill 32 people and injure 23 more. It would be one of the worst school shootings in history. "Oh, the happiness I could have had mingling among you hedonists, being counted as one of you," Cho wrote in his rambling, borderline nonsensical manifesto. "If only you didn't fuck the living shit out of me." He accused society of raping my soul and committing emotional sodomy, although he never quite explained what that meant. In part, though, he was furious at people he called descendants of Satan disguised as devout Christians. He saw himself as the Messiah. "Like Moses, I spread the sea and lead my people to eternal freedom," he said. He called Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold martyrs, people who had sacrificed their lives to make society suffer, and chillingly promised that his massacre would set the example of the century for my children to follow. For all his God complex, though, the people who knew Cho saw him as pitiful. A teacher called him the loneliest person I've ever met in my life. In the work he'd handed in, there might have been a clue into what made him this way. He'd written play after play all about the same thing: young boys being abused by pedophiles.